The Angel of Death. The voice that made 200 fighters surrender, a woman, calling an airstrike. That voice crackled in my headset, cutting through static and wind. It wasn't mockery. It was shock, pure disbelief from a battle-hardened commander deep in the red zone. Early 2000s, back then. I was a fire control officer, stationed at a covert outpost in the Kesari Valley. We operated in total darkness, no lights, no markers, every time our aircraft lifted off. It was a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek between life and death. That night, Nightwing Squadron was assigned to patrol the Sankar Hills, an area crawling with signs of Umbra insurgent activity. From above, I spotted something odd: headlights, a vehicle moving toward a small compound in the pitch-black Al-Sara desert. I keyed the mic: unidentified vehicle approaching target site. Multiple parked cars, armed personnel outside. Ground forces requested visual confirmation. I scanned again. There's movement. Weapons visible, likely Umbra. The reply came fast: weapons free. I glanced at Lieutenant Colonel Keegan Holt, the weapons controller beside me. We exchanged a silent nod. No words, no hesitation. I didn't pull the trigger, but I gave the order. After the first strike hit, I heard them on the comms shouting, breathing hard. Alive. We're still here. Who the hell are you? I answered instinctively, like I had many times before, just someone watching from the dark. I had no idea that sentence would become my battlefield identity, and I never expected that my voice, not a bullet, would send shockwaves far beyond the reach of any radar. My name is Alex Carter. Some in the military call me the Angel in the Shadows, not because of how I look or any fame, but because I always showed up where the light couldn't reach. I was the eye in the sky, guiding those fighting below. I grew up in Ravendale, a peaceful suburban town. No one in my family ever wore a uniform. But even as a kid, I was drawn to the idea of serving something greater than myself. There was a military academy not far from where I lived, Ironcrest, and though I didn't know anyone inside, I found myself fascinated by that world of discipline and purpose. At 18, while my friends were choosing colleges, beauty schools, or starting small businesses, I enlisted in the Federal Air Corps. It was March, early 90s. I didn't know the first thing about protocol. I couldn't march, and I was completely unprepared for the intensity of the training. But I stayed, because I believed deep down that I was born to protect what's right. I wasn't good at it right away. I often asked myself, am I strong enough, smart enough? But every failure became fuel. Every fall pushed me forward. During training, we were introduced to a series of special programs: bomb defusal, combat coordination, air rescue jumps, and one that immediately caught my attention: Blackbird survival. It was brutal, designed to train us to survive, escape, and resist under extreme conditions. I had never lived outdoors, never caught a fish, never slept in the woods, but maybe that's why I chose it. Because it scared me. I asked the instructor, "What if I don't make it?" He said, "You'll still have a place in the Corps." So I tried, and I made it. 6 months later, I was no longer the timid girl from the suburbs. I was a fighter, one who knew how to survive, and more importantly, how to protect those beside me. And I wasn't alone. I had found a family, brothers and sisters, not by blood, but by battle. I kept studying at night, earning extra certifications. By the late 90s, I was accepted into the officer training program. After graduation, I was assigned to navigator training at Elmridge AFB. I'd never set foot in a cockpit, but I was determined to learn how to guide from the skies. What I wanted most was to return to the Special Forces. That chance came when I joined Nightwing Squadron, a low-flying assault unit known for precise air support under cover of darkness. The Nightwing wasn't pretty. It was big, slow, and rough, but it could circle overhead for hours, delivering pinpoint strikes, one building, one hotspot at a time. It was a shield for those on the ground, and I chose it because I didn't want to command from afar. I wanted to be the eyes, the ears, and the protection. On the first night of Operation Dark Moon, I couldn't sleep. The weight of every decision, knowing it could save lives or end them, kept my heart in midair. But I was ready. I wasn't the lost 18-year-old anymore. I was a tactical operations officer, grounded in a purpose that had never wavered. I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to stop the bad from stealing the good. That's when the name The Angel in the Shadows began to stick. Not because I was cold, but because I brought light to the places no one else dared to go. We landed at Forward Operating Base Arcanis, nestled near the icy border of Ravashan, a mountain range frozen year-round. The cold wasn't just physical. It clung to your bones, slowed your breath, sharpened your senses. The kind of cold that reminded you you're not home, you're at war. It was early winter, bitterly cold. We had just a few hours of rest before the mission order came in, and no one complained. That's the thing about those of us who live in the sky. You learn to rest in fragments, to trust adrenaline more than sleep. There was no advanced navigation tech like today. No satellite feeds, no real-time mapping overlays. Just instinct, paper, and memory. I flipped open my familiar blue notebook, handwritten coordinates, radio frequencies, call signs. The ink was smudged in some places. Sweat, dust, blood from a nosebleed I didn't even remember having. But it held everything I needed to survive, stay connected, and complete the job. Before takeoff, a chaplain entered our tent, quietly offering a prayer. He didn't say much, just a look, a nod, as if to say, you already know what you're about to face. Outside, our gunship stood open against the slicing wind of the Al-Sara Desert. Not majestic, just functional. A hunk of metal designed to haunt the night. A military attorney reminded us of the 3 simple rules of engagement. No firing at women or children, no targeting places of worship, everything else based on your judgment. That 3rd rule. It never left my head, because in combat, judgment is the first thing to get clouded, and also the only thing that can keep you human. Then we lifted off, flying low over a wasteland near the eastern edge of Varashir. The hum of the engines filled the space where fear might otherwise live. In the sky, I scanned the terrain, choosing a patch of empty dunes to calibrate our weapons. We test-fired, adjusted aim. Nothing fancy, just enough to know our rounds would land where we needed them to. Then we turned toward the coordinates of our allies. Task Force Raptor 595, working alongside General Qasim, commander of the Northern Coalition. This was my first real combat op, the kind where people either come home or don't. We made contact over comms. November skies over Ravashan were pitch black, no lights, no movement. The only visible thing was the occasional dust swirl in the moonlight, like ghosts retreating into the hills. Night was the only time we were safe to fly. Even the smallest motion could give us away. I've never been more aware of my own breath. Raptor reported a vehicle moving near their position. From the sky, I was their eyes describing speed, direction, distance, vehicle type. They couldn't see from the ground. I could, and I could feel it, the tension in my voice, the responsibility curling around every word. Aboard our gunship flying across the night above Zalaran, I sat at the controls, eyes locked on the thermal screen. There was no soundproofing, the cold wind howled inside, but my mind was burning hot. This was it, my first real mission. Not a drill, not a simulation, not a what if. This was someone's life or death. The screen blinked non-stop. I swept the thermal sensors across every coordinate Raptor sent. They spotted multiple heat signatures moving toward their base near Underak. I issued the command, hold altitude, battle mode. My eyes tracked a faint line, a remote highway. A vehicle was charging through the darkness where no civilian dared drive at night. I called it out in real-time: pickup truck, lights on, 4 occupants, distance to target 400 meters, 300, 200. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart was pacing like a caged animal. I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid to make the wrong call. The ground team confirmed copy. High probability Umbra. Weapons ready. But right before we fired, the vehicle turned suddenly into a small compound not listed on our maps. I called for a pause. Stop! No shot! I need eyes inside that compound. We didn't kill unless we were sure. And that night, sure was a feeling, not a fact. I switched to scan mode and saw 3 other trucks already parked. Over a dozen armed men stepped into the open. I reported in, seconds later. The reply came from the ground, confirmed Umbra stronghold. Permission to engage. I nodded. Copy. Weapons hot. Lighted up. 105mm, 40mm. Round after round poured from the sky. Every impact lit up the thermal screen like lightning. Vehicles ignited. People burst from the building like ants from a shattered nest. We didn't dump it all at once. I learned to read patterns, how they ran, how they regrouped, every time they clustered. I gave the signal, each strike, like the sweep of a reaper's blade. After nearly 30 minutes, we were almost out of ammo. And still, I hesitated before the final burst. Not because I doubted the mission, but because, for a second, I remembered my training. Sometimes the strongest command is the one you don't give. But that night, I gave it. I had no idea that. Down below, General Qasim, who was listening to all of it, turned to my teammate and asked, "Wait, that's a woman." "Yes, sir. She's the one commanding the gunship." Qasim laughed in disbelief. "The Americans want Umbra gone so badly. They're putting women in charge of warbirds. Then, without warning." He flipped on the open channel, letting the enemy hear my voice, and shouted into the radio, "You're done. An American woman is wiping you out from the sky. Surrender while you still can. We marked targets with lasers." But on the ground, their morale shattered. As our last rounds hit, the screen went eerily quiet. I watched through thermal hundreds of armed men running. Some dropped weapons. Some raised their hands. By dawn, the reports came in over 200 Umbra fighters surrendered to General Qasim, all from a single night of fire. Lasers and the voice of a woman they never expected. We didn't know the full effect. We just knew we did our job and kept our people alive. That night, something shifted inside me. This wasn't training anymore. This was war. And I was writing my part of it one order at a time, from that moment on. The name spread, the Angel of Death, not just because I was a woman, but because I had seen evil in the dark and struck without flinching. And that night, I learned something else. A voice can be a weapon. After the battle at Underak, I was reassigned to Task Force Nightshade, a covert unit that operated independently, behind enemy lines. There, I wasn't just calling support strikes anymore. I became the one drawing the entire map. At first, I coordinated Black Ops missions using stealth aircraft and armed drones. But soon, I was given full control planning operations that simply could not fail. Because if they did, there would be no one left to tell the story. We worked in the dark. No rank insignias, no public records, no medals, just encrypted signals, a tight intel network, and an unblinking eye on the battlefield. That's when I learned true power doesn't come from the trigger. It comes from seeing what no one else sees, knowing when not to strike, knowing when to wait, knowing when silence is louder than orders, and most of all, knowing who has the courage to do what no one else will. I trained soldiers who had never seen combat to become ghosts in urban jungles, taught them how to disappear in a world full of cameras, guided them from hundreds of kilometers away, from a silent command room filled only with radar, heat maps, and a voice they trusted through the sound of war. From then on, the Angel of Death wasn't a nickname anymore. It became a code. When ground forces heard my voice in their headset, they knew they weren't alone. I used to think I was just a cog in the machine, a nameless voice in the comms, a shadow drifting in the night sky. But then, I started hearing the stories. Stories about little girls in villages who weren't allowed to speak freely. About mothers hiding books under floorboards to teach their daughters how to read. About young women once afraid now whispering to each other, "If she could do it, why can't I?" In those forgotten places, the so-called gray zones where women were silenced, boxed in by rules they never chose. The story of a woman in the night sky, one who didn't strike to destroy, but fought to protect, began to spread like a fragile sliver of light. But it was enough. Enough to shake something loose in a few quiet hearts. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a hero. I'm just living proof that sometimes a single voice, if clear enough, if steady enough, can cut through even the thickest darkness. And if you're out there, in one of those gray zones, if you've ever believed you had no choice, if you've ever feared you weren't strong enough to change anything, then I'm not here to give you orders. I'm here to whisper something you may have never heard before. You can